I entered the crowded room. The loud music and the colorful lights swirling around the room were not enough to drown out the chill that ran down my spine. My eyes met hers before I could even take a deep breath. There she was, smiling in a way I no longer recognized. Her delicate hands rested on the shoulder of a man I had never seen before, and she asked him to dance. The laughter mingled with the beat of the music, but all I could hear was the suffocating silence inside me. The glass in my hand shook slightly as I watched the scene unfold before me like a nightmare I knew I couldn't wake up from. Every step they took on the track seemed to crush the years of trust and love I thought we had built together. I took a deep breath, pulling the envelope that was already prepared from my pocket. The words printed inside burned like hot iron in my hands. As I walked towards them, each step felt heavier than the last. I knew that decision would change everything. When I finally reached the two of them, her smile froze, and her eyes widened when she saw me standing there. The man next to her took a step back, confused, but I barely registered it. I held out the envelope, handing it firmly, without taking my eyes off hers. She hesitated before taking it, and her trembling fingers tore the side of the paper. His eyes flicked over the words that I knew would be forever etched in his memory: filing for divorce. This can't be serious," she murmured, her voice breaking. "It's a misunderstanding. I swear, this isn't what it seems. Please listen to me. It's not what you think." Her words were desperate, but I felt nothing but an icy emptiness taking over me. I already knew everything. Every lie, every poorly told excuse. I knew about the man, the hidden messages, the nights she said she was with her friends. I even knew of the false declarations of love that had come in the last few days, as a pathetic cover for his guilt. "I've heard enough," he said, cutting off his plea. "There is nothing more to be said." She grabbed my arm, her teary eyes begging for a chance to explain herself, but I just walked away. The once vibrant hall seemed to have stopped to watch the scene, but none of that mattered. What mattered was that I was free. Free from the lie, the betrayal, the weight I carried for too long. Or at least that's what I thought at the time. But what I didn't know was that that night wouldn't be the end. It would just be the beginning. Because the man next to her wasn't just any stranger. He was part of something bigger. Something I hadn't discovered yet. Something that would make me question not only my marriage, but my entire life. And as I left the room, leaving behind the muffled sound of her crying, I felt that this story was still far from over. Something was wrong. Something was about to change irreversibly. And I wasn't prepared for what came next. Welcome to the channel where the truth about betrayal is exposed in a raw and impactful way. Here, we never support or romanticize infidelity. All the stories presented are fictional, but they carry real lessons about how betrayal can destroy lives, relationships, and trust. Get ready to dive into an intense narrative, full of twists, raw emotions, and inevitable consequences. Fasten your seatbelts and get ready for a shocking story that will keep you hooked from beginning to end. Happy listening. Lucas always believed that life was made up of predictable cycles, like seasons that repeat year after year. At 36, he felt he had reached what many would consider the pinnacle of a successful life. Owner of a small graphic design company, a business he built from scratch with effort and dedication, he had financial stability and a respectable social circle. But most of all, he had Emily. The woman he met during college, with whom he shared dreams and plans, and who became his wife for more than 10 years. Emily was the kind of woman who lit up any room. Her smile seemed to have the power to calm Lucas' fears and, for a long time, he believed that nothing could shake the solid bond they had built together. The house they lived in was a reflection of the life they had created. An elegant townhouse, with walls in neutral tones and large windows that let sunlight in the morning. Emily had a natural talent for decorating, and every corner reflected a piece of her. Black and white photographs hanging on the walls, scented candles on the tables, and fresh flowers that never seemed to be missing. Lucas loved coming home after a long day of work and being greeted by the scent of lavender that she always kept in the room. It made him feel grounded, like the outside world couldn't touch them. For him, Emily was the center of that stability. In the early years of their marriage, Lucas and Emily were inseparable. They traveled frequently, tried new restaurants, and spent hours talking about the future. But as time went by, the routine took over. Conversations began to revolve around bills, home renovations and plans to have children that, for some reason, never seemed to get off the ground. Lucas tried not to let the emotional distance between them bother him. He believed that true love was resilient, that it could survive difficult times. Emily seemed to think so too, or at least that was what Lucas wanted to believe whenever he saw her gaze wandering into space during dinners or when he felt her answers becoming shorter and more hasty. Despite this, Lucas remained devoted. He was the type who showed love through practical gestures. He fixed the plumbing when there was a problem, brought flowers for no particular reason and organized surprises on holidays. Emily, on the other hand, was more emotional. She liked symbolic gestures and deep conversations, things that, over time, became increasingly rare between the two. Still, she remained affectionate. Or at least it seemed like it. Lucas interpreted the quick kisses before leaving for work and the "I love you" whispered at night as signs that the love was still there, even if dormant. Their social life was busy. Emily liked going out with her friends, especially to events and parties that Lucas, most of the time, preferred to avoid. He was never one to like crowds, but he trusted Emily. She always came home smiling, telling funny stories about the people she met and the moments she lived. Lucas listened to her, laughed along, but sometimes felt a slight discomfort when she mentioned people he had never heard of before. He quickly dismissed these thoughts, convincing himself that they were just a reflection of his own insecurity. Their marriage, in everyone's eyes, was perfect. Emily was seen as an exemplary, elegant and dedicated wife. Lucas was admired for his responsible attitude and the way he took care of Emily. They were the couple that others used as a reference. Close friends praised them for the connection they appeared to have, but Lucas knew that behind that image there were cracks that were beginning to grow. Small arguments over trivial things, like forgotten schedules or appointments, became more frequent. Emily seemed to get angry easily, and Lucas began to feel increasingly disconnected. There were nights when Lucas would wake up in the middle of the night and find Emily sitting on the couch, staring at her cell phone with an expression he couldn't decipher. When I asked what was wrong, she always responded with something vague, like insomnia or worries about work. He believed, or at least tried to believe. But restlessness grew within him, especially when Emily began spending more time out, citing dinners with friends or work meetings that ended late. Lucas didn't want to seem controlling, so he never questioned too much. But her smiles seemed more forced, her kisses less natural, and something inside him began to warn him that something was wrong. Emily, meanwhile, looked more radiant than ever. She was more attentive to her appearance, bought new clothes more frequently and spent more time getting ready before going out. Lucas praised her, thinking that perhaps it was a phase in which she was rediscovering her self-esteem. He wanted to support her, he wanted to be the husband she needed. But, at certain moments, he found himself watching her from afar, trying to understand what had changed. When asked, Emily responded that she wanted to feel good about herself, that she was tired of the routine. Lucas accepted the explanation, but he couldn't shake the tight knot that formed in his chest. Meanwhile, Lucas continued to try to keep the marriage alive. He organized a romantic dinner at home, bought Emily's favorite wines and prepared a special dish. She smiled, thanked him and said she was surprised, but something in her expression seemed distant. As if he was there physically, but his mind wandered elsewhere. Lucas clung to the moment, trying to ignore the signs. He pulled her to dance in the middle of the room, holding her against his chest and trying to remember what it was like when nothing seemed to threaten the love they shared. But time continued to pass, and Lucas began to feel like a spectator of his own life. He watched Emily from afar, feeling like something was slipping through his fingers. He wanted to trust, he wanted to believe that everything was fine, but the signs were there. The emotional distance, the strange hours, the whispered phone calls. Lucas wondered if he was being paranoid, if his mind was creating problems where there were none. But intuition was insistent. She whispered that something was about to fall apart. And it was that night, in the lounge, that everything changed. The decision to follow Emily, to discover the truth, led Lucas on a path of no return. He never imagined that his suspicions would be confirmed like this. But what he found was just the beginning of an even more devastating revelation, one that would make him question not just his marriage, but everything he believed he knew about Emily and himself. Lucas didn't know it yet, but that night would mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, much darker and more unpredictable. Lucas spent the next few days trying to ignore the growing weight pressing down on his chest. The routine went on as usual, but there was something out of place. Emily was still smiling, attentive and, in a way, more present than usual, which should calm any insecurities he might have had. However, the more she tried to appear normal, the more Lucas felt something was wrong. The calls that ended abruptly when he entered the room, the increasingly frequent delays, and the elaborate excuses began to pile up like pieces of an incomplete puzzle. He tried to push away the bad thoughts, but the doubts insisted on tormenting him, growing like a shadow that followed him everywhere. The nights were especially difficult. Lucas tossed and turned in bed, listening to the light sound of Emily's breathing beside him. She slept soundly, as if she had no burden on her conscience. He, on the other hand, felt his chest tight and his thoughts in turmoil. I tried to find logical explanations for her behavior, but everything seemed inconsistent. It was as if he was trying to hold sand in his hands, only to have it run through his fingers. One night, unable to bear the suffocating silence, he got out of bed and went down to the living room. He took out his cell phone and, with trembling fingers, opened Emily's social networks. He found nothing out of the ordinary, smiling photos, comments from friends and family. But the emptiness he felt when scrolling through the images made him realize that the distance between them went far beyond the physical. Over the next few days, Lucas began to pay more attention to details. He noticed how Emily constantly checked her cell phone, even during casual conversations. He watched the moments when she smiled at the screen, as if she were reading something that made her happy, only to quickly hide the device when she realized he was looking. Lucas tried to convince himself that he was exaggerating, but the feeling of being deceived only grew. He felt increasingly uneasy, as if he were watching a movie where he already knew the ending, but he couldn't stop the story from taking its inevitable course. One Saturday night, Emily said she had been invited to a get-together with coworkers. Lucas, trying to maintain his composure, just nodded and said he hoped she had fun. She smiled, gave him a quick kiss and hurried away, leaving behind the sweet perfume she always wore. Lucas stood still for a few minutes, staring at the closed door, feeling the weight of loneliness take over him. Something inside him screamed for him to act, but the voice was muffled by the fear of being wrong. He feared discovering something he couldn't undo. Hours passed, and Lucas was still sitting on the couch, staring at the phone on the coffee table. Her messages were brief and generic, as if they were written just to keep up appearances. He finally gave in to the urge and opened a tracking app he had installed on Emily's phone months earlier, during a trip where he feared for her safety. His stomach tightened when he saw that she wasn't in any familiar restaurant or bar, but rather at an address he didn't recognize. The decision to leave home came automatically. He grabbed his car keys and drove without thinking much about what he would do when he got there. When parking in front of a small residential building, Lucas spent a few minutes in the car, trying to calm his breathing. Every second seemed to drag on like an eternity. He knew that crossing that door could change everything, but there was no going back. He climbed the stairs with firm steps, ignoring the cold sweat running down his back. When he reached the hallway and saw the door ajar, he felt his heart race. The faint light escaping through the crack was enough to confirm that there was someone inside. He took a deep breath before slowly pushing the door open, praying he was wrong. The sight that awaited him on the other side made the ground seem to disappear beneath his feet. Emily was there, laughing at something the man in front of her said. They were too close, too intimate. Lucas froze for a moment, unable to process what he was seeing. It was Emily's laughter that woke him from his shock, a sound that had once made him smile but now cut like a blade. He entered the room, and Emily's face lost all color when she saw him standing there. The man next to her stood up quickly, looking as surprised as she was. Lucas couldn't look away from Emily's eyes, which were now shining with a mixture of guilt and fear. The words escaped before he could stop them. He asked what was happening, but the answer came in silence, in the trembling of Emily's hands and the desperation in her voice when she tried to explain herself. She insisted that it wasn't what it seemed, that there was an explanation for everything, but Lucas was no longer listening. Each word sounded like a distant echo, drowned out by the deafening sound of his own beating heart. The man tried to intervene, saying he was just a friend, but the anger building inside Lucas made him take a step forward, forcing him to retreat. Emily stepped between them, begging him to listen, but all Lucas could see was the betrayal in her expression. He felt his throat tighten as he fought to maintain control. Anger mixed with pain, creating a storm that threatened to consume him. Emily was crying now, asking for forgiveness, but Lucas no longer believed anything that came out of her mouth. Her every tear felt like a desperate attempt at manipulation, and he didn't want to be fooled any longer. He turned to leave, but Emily grabbed his arm, begging him not to give up on them. Lucas finally broke free of the hold and walked out the door without looking back, leaving Emily and the man in silence, trapped by the weight of what they had done. As he walked down the hallway, Lucas felt his emotions oscillating between fury and despair. He knew this wasn't the end, but he also didn't know how to move forward. Questions began to form in his mind, each one more disturbing than the last. Who was that man? How long had that been happening? And most of all, why? He needed answers, but he feared what he might find out. When he got to the car, he sat down at the wheel and looked at his shaking hands. He knew that night would change everything, but he had no idea how deep the hole really was. And in that moment, as the street lights flashed through the windshield, Lucas felt like something much bigger was still about to be revealed. Lucas didn't sleep that night. The image of Emily next to that man kept repeating in his mind like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. His chest felt tight, his fists were clenched and his breathing was uneven. Thoughts swirled, running over each other. Her words, her pleas, her desperate pleas for him to listen, they all sounded hollow now. He knew the trust had been destroyed, but a part of him still needed answers. I needed to understand how everything had gotten there. I needed to know what else was hiding beneath the surface. When the sun finally rose, he stood up, determined to confront her. I didn't want any more half-words. I wanted the truth, no matter how painful it was. Emily was sitting on the couch when he entered. His eyes were red and swollen, his face was pale as if he hadn't slept. She stood up as soon as she saw him, but Lucas raised his hand, asking her not to come any closer. He wanted to keep his distance, even if it was just symbolic. I needed to maintain control. Emily opened her mouth to speak, but Lucas cut her off before she could begin. He asked how long it had been happening and who the man he saw was. She tried to look away, but he insisted, demanding answers. Emily finally gave in, admitting that she had met this man at work and that it all started as a friendship. But her answer did not satisfy him. Lucas wanted to know more. He wanted to know why she had destroyed everything they had. Emily, with tears streaming down her face, said she was confused, that she was missing something she couldn't explain, and that she had made a terrible mistake. But Lucas felt there was more. Something she was still hiding. The tension in the air increased by the minute. Lucas pressed, asked, demanded. Emily cried, hesitated, tried to avoid it. But when he threatened to leave for good, she finally broke down. He admitted there was something more, something he was afraid to tell. Lucas felt his stomach turn. He asked her to speak quickly, to end it once and for all. Emily took a deep, shaking breath and confessed that the man he saw her with wasn't just a coworker. He was someone she had known for a long time. Someone who had already been part of her past. Lucas looked at her without understanding. Emily continued, saying he was an old boyfriend. But it wasn't just that. She hesitated again, and Lucas lost his patience, shouting for her to speak quickly. It was then that Emily revealed the secret she had been hiding for so long. The man wasn't just an ex-boyfriend. He was the biological father of the son Emily never told Lucas she had before meeting him. Lucas was paralyzed. Her words echoed in his mind, but he couldn't absorb them. A son? Did she have a son? How did he never know about this? Emily tried to explain, saying that her son had been raised by his grandparents, and that she never thought that would matter to their relationship. But Lucas felt as if the ground had collapsed beneath his feet. He asked why she never told him, why she hid something so important. Emily said she was afraid of being judged, afraid he would leave her if he found out. But none of this made sense to Lucas. He couldn't accept that, all those years, he lived with someone who hid such a big secret. Anger took over him. He stood up, pacing back and forth, trying to process what he had just heard. Emily kept trying to explain, saying that her son was now an adult, that he had been looking for her recently and that was why she started finding him. Lucas looked at her in disbelief. She asked if the man she was seen with was the father or the son. Emily hesitated, and Lucas knew he already knew the answer. He was the father. The man she loved in the past and who, somehow, had come back into her life. Lucas felt his blood boil. He asked if she still had feelings for him, but Emily denied it. He said he was trying to help his son reconnect with his father, that everything had gotten out of control, that he didn't know how to deal with the situation. But Lucas didn't believe anything she said. For him, it was all just another excuse. Another lie. Emily tried to get closer, but Lucas backed away. He asked if she was in love with the man, if she had plans to be with him. Emily shook her head, crying, saying she didn't want anything to do with him, that it was all a mistake. But Lucas couldn't hear any more. For him, that was the end. He felt there was nothing left to be saved, nothing left to be rebuilt. Emily kept begging, saying she would do anything to fix it, but Lucas just took the keys and left. He needed air. I needed to think. I needed to get away from her. As he drove aimlessly, Lucas felt emotions explode inside him. The pain, the anger, the disappointment. Everything seemed to mix together in a whirlwind that left him stunned. He tried to remember all the moments they spent together, all the promises they made to each other. He tried to understand at what point everything started to fall apart. But there were no answers. Just questions and more questions. He stopped the car on the side of the road and felt tears running down his face. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel the weight of betrayal and lies. He felt as if everything he had built had been a sham. But at the same time, he knew he couldn't let this destroy him. I knew I needed to find a way to move forward. Lucas returned home hours later, but found Emily sitting in the living room, waiting for him. She stood up as soon as she saw him enter, but he stopped her before she could speak. He said he had heard enough. That there was nothing more to be said. Emily tried to argue, saying that she loved him, that she wanted to make things right, but Lucas wouldn't budge. He said he needed time and space. Emily cried, but this time he was unmoved. He just grabbed a few things and left again, leaving her alone with the weight of her own choices. As he walked down the street, Lucas felt that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Something he still couldn't fully see. But he knew he needed to be prepared, because, despite everything, he wasn't willing to be destroyed. I was determined to find a way out of that situation, even if it meant starting everything from scratch. And, deep down, I felt that there were still more truths waiting to be revealed. Truths that could change everything again. Lucas drove aimlessly, the sky beginning to darken as his headlights illuminated the asphalt in front of him. The weight of what he had discovered seemed to suffocate him, but he knew that running away wouldn't solve anything. After hours of wandering the streets, he decided to return home. Not because I wanted to resolve things with Emily, but because I knew there were still unanswered questions. He parked in the garage and remained in the car for a few minutes, trying to organize his thoughts before entering. When he finally opened the door, he found Emily sitting on the couch, her eyes red and tired. She stood up slowly when she saw him, but he kept his distance, crossing his arms as if that were enough to protect himself from any words that might come out of her mouth. Emily started to speak, but Lucas raised his hand, interrupting her. He was tired of empty explanations. I wanted more than words. I wanted to know the whole truth. Emily took a deep breath, her voice shaking as she asked if he was willing to hear everything, even if it hurt even more. Lucas nodded, his eyes fixed on her, waiting. She began by saying that the man he saw was not just the father of her child. There was more. Emily revealed that, over the past few months, she had gotten closer to him not only because of her son, but because he was experiencing financial and emotional difficulties. He had lost his job and was struggling to rebuild his life. Emily said she felt sorry, that she wanted to help him, but things got out of control. Lucas shook his head, irritated. He asked if she really expected him to believe that justification. Emily begged him to try to understand, that she never wanted to hurt him. He said he didn't know how to stop, how to cut ties without seeming cruel. But Lucas wasn't willing to accept any more excuses. He demanded to know if there was anything more, if she had done something worse than what he already knew. Emily hesitated, which made Lucas lose his patience. He approached, his voice raised as he asked her if she was still in love with the other man. Emily denied it, but her words came out weak, as if she didn't even believe what she was saying. Lucas took a step back, feeling the weight of that unspoken confession. He knew. I knew that, no matter how much Emily tried to minimize what had happened, there were feelings involved. And that destroyed him even more. Emily was crying now, trying to touch him, but Lucas backed away. He needed space, he needed time. But Emily didn't seem willing to let him go without a fight. She followed him around the room, begging him to stay, not to give up on them. Lucas turned around sharply, his eyes filled with anger and pain. He asked how she could expect him to forget all that, to pretend that nothing had happened. Emily kept insisting, saying they could get through this together. Lucas laughed, but there was no humor in his laugh. He asked how they could get through something like this, how he could trust her again after everything. Emily knelt on the floor, holding his hands, her eyes pleading. She said she would do anything, that she would prove how much she loved him. Lucas pulled his hands away, moving away from her. He said he didn't want empty promises, that he had heard enough. Emily screamed, saying that he couldn't just give up, that they had built a life together. But Lucas replied that she herself had destroyed that life, and that he didn't know if it was possible to rebuild it. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Emily slowly stood up, her eyes swollen and full of tears. He said he knew he was wrong, but that he loved him. Lucas turned to leave, but she ran after him, holding his arm tightly. She asked him if he still loved her. Lucas hesitated, feeling the weight of that question. He loved her. But was that enough? He pulled his arm free of her grip and walked out the door without looking back. Over the next few days, Lucas avoided Emily. He stayed in a hotel, trying to put his thoughts in order. But each night, loneliness haunted him. He thought about the years they spent together, the happy moments, the promises made. I thought about how distant everything now seemed, as if it belonged to another life. Emily called every day, leaving messages he didn't hear. He needed time. But the pain kept throbbing, and he knew he couldn't run away forever. It was then that he received an unexpected message. It wasn't from Emily, but from the man he saw her with. The text was short, asking them to meet. Lucas felt his stomach turn, but he accepted. I needed to face that head-on. When he arrived at the agreed location, he found the man sitting at a table at the back of the cafe. He seemed nervous, moving constantly. Lucas sat, eyes fixed on him, waiting. The man began by apologizing, saying he never wanted to destroy a marriage. Lucas interrupted him, demanding that he get straight to the point. The man took a deep breath and revealed that there was something Emily didn't tell him. He said that they never intended to rekindle their past romance, but that something changed when they started meeting to talk about their son. He admitted that there were times when old feelings came back to the surface, but assured that Emily always spoke about Lucas with respect and love. However, what really shocked Lucas was what came next. The man confessed that he was facing financial problems and that Emily helped him with money. A lot of money. More than Lucas could imagine. Lucas felt his blood boil. He asked how Emily could have hidden something like that, how she could have used their money to support another man. The man tried to justify it, saying that Emily just wanted to help, that she felt guilty for leaving him in the past. But Lucas couldn't hear anything else. He stood up abruptly, leaving the man sitting there, lost in his own explanations. When he returned home, he found Emily waiting for him. She stood up as soon as he entered, her eyes full of hope, but Lucas got straight to the point. He asked about the money. Emily tried to deny it, but Lucas insisted, forcing her to admit it. She said she just wanted to help, that she didn't think it was that serious. Lucas was incredulous. He asked how she could have done something like that without consulting him, without thinking about the consequences. Emily cried, saying she was afraid to tell him, that she knew he wouldn't understand. Lucas exploded, saying that the problem wasn't that he didn't understand, but that she made decisions alone, hiding important things. He said their marriage wasn't based on secrets, and that now he didn't know if he could trust her. Emily begged, saying that the money meant nothing, that she just wanted to help someone who was once important to her. But Lucas didn't want to hear any more. He said he needed to think, that he no longer knew if it was possible to continue. Emily tried to hold him back, but Lucas left, feeling that maybe this was the end. As I walked down the street, I felt the tears flowing, but also a growing determination. He knew he needed to make a decision, but he still didn't know what it would be. And, deep down, I feared that the worst was yet to come. Lucas spent the next few days in a daze, as if he were wandering through a dense fog that he could not escape. Emily's words still echoed in his mind, as did her hasty justifications and pleading eyes. He felt torn, trapped between the love he still carried for her and the betrayal that was eating him up inside. Even when he tried to divert the thought, the flashes of the night he saw her with another man came back with a vengeance, followed by the crushing revelation about the money and the son she kept secret. It was as if every good memory was now stained by doubts and lies, making it impossible to see any sign of truth in what they lived together. Lucas knew he needed to make a decision, but the more he thought about it, the more lost he felt. He tried to occupy himself by immersing himself in work, but the emails and meetings seemed inconsequential compared to the emotional chaos he faced. Emily's messages continued to arrive, but he no longer read them. He left his cell phone aside, avoiding its insistent ringing whenever she tried to call. No matter how much he tried to move away, her image remained in his mind. He remembered their first date, the nervousness he felt when asking for her number, the trips they took together in the first years of their marriage, the plans they built side by side. How had all that turned into what it was now? When did they start to get lost? Lucas felt like he had failed at something, that he should have noticed the signs sooner. But part of him also knew that this wasn't his fault alone. Emily made choices that destroyed what they had, and he couldn't forgive her for it. It was only after a week away that he decided to return to the house to collect some clothes and documents he had left behind. He walked in without warning, expecting to find Emily collapsed like the last time he saw her, but he found her sitting on the couch, her face tired and her eyes sunken. He looked like a shadow of his former self, but he stood up as soon as he saw him, as if hope was rekindled in his chest. Lucas ignored the urge to leave and met her gaze, maintaining a firm posture. Emily took a step forward, but he raised his hand, asking her to stop. He said he wasn't there to argue, he just wanted to get his things. Emily nodded, but the tension in the air was almost palpable. As Lucas walked up the stairs to his room, he felt Emily's footsteps following him, and before he could stop her, she began to speak. She said she was sorry, that she didn't know how to repair the damage she had caused, but that she was willing to do whatever was necessary. Lucas turned away, exhausted from that conversation, but she continued, saying that she wanted to be honest this time, that she didn't want to hide anything anymore. He stared at her for a moment before asking what else there was to be said. Emily hesitated, her hands shaking, and then told her that the man had asked for more money, threatening to expose everything if she didn't help. Lucas was silent, feeling his stomach turn. He asked if it was blackmail, and Emily confirmed, saying that she tried to resolve it herself, but ended up getting too involved. Lucas felt the anger rising again. He asked how she could be so naive, how she could let the situation get out of control. Emily cried, saying she was desperate, that she thought she was protecting Lucas by hiding everything. But to him, that sounded like another excuse. He said he didn't need protection, he needed honesty. Emily tried to get closer, but he retreated, feeling that the distance between them was much greater than the physical space. He said she had destroyed their trust, that he didn't know if he could look at her again without thinking about everything that had been hidden. Emily begged him to stay, but Lucas took his things and left, leaving her alone in the house. On the way to the hotel, he felt the weight of her words weighing down on his shoulders. He thought about the blackmail, the way she handled it without even consulting him. He felt humiliated, used, as if his life had been turned into a carefully maintained lie. He wanted to forget, he wanted to move on, but the pain kept throbbing like an open wound. Even in the silence of the hotel room, he could not find peace. Every thought took him back to Emily, to her tears, to the desperation in her voice. Part of him wanted to believe she was sorry, but the other part knew that regret wasn't enough to erase the damage. The next day, Lucas received an unexpected call from the man who was involved in the story. His voice sounded nervous, almost desperate. He asked to meet him, said he needed to clarify some things. Lucas hesitated, but accepted. When he arrived at the agreed location, he found the man with a haggard expression. He started talking quickly, saying he was sorry, that he never wanted to take the situation that far. He admitted that he used Emily's insecurities against her, that he took advantage of her fear of losing the wedding to get the money. Lucas listened in silence, feeling his disgust grow with each word. He asked why he had done that, and the man said he was desperate, but now he saw the damage he had caused. He apologized, but Lucas couldn't accept it. He said nothing he said could undo the damage. The man tried to justify himself, saying that Emily just wanted to help, that she felt guilty about the past, but Lucas didn't want to hear it anymore. He got up and left, his chest feeling heavy. He knew Emily had been manipulated, but that didn't change the fact that she had lied, hidden important things. I knew that this situation did not have an easy outcome, but I also knew that I needed to move on. When he arrived back at the hotel, he found a new message from Emily. She said she understood if he never wanted to see her again, but that she needed to know if there was still any hope for them. Lucas stared at the message for a long time before responding. He said he didn't know, that he needed more time. Emily replied that she would wait, that she would do whatever was necessary. But Lucas didn't know if time would be enough to heal that wound. As he stared at his cell phone screen, he felt the moral dilemma before him was overwhelming. On the one hand, he still loved Emily and saw the genuine regret in her eyes. On the other, he knew that trust had been destroyed and that he might never be able to see her the same way again. Over the next few days, Lucas found himself stuck in a cycle of indecision. I thought about confronting her again, about asking for clearer answers, but I was also afraid of what I might discover. At the same time, he was tempted to cut all ties and start over. Each path seemed painful, each choice carried an unbearable weight. He knew he needed to make a decision, but the fear of regret kept him from taking the next step. And, as he fought against his own emotions, he felt that the end of that story was still far from being written. Lucas sat on the park bench, his gaze lost on the fountain in front of him, while the voices of the people around him seemed like a distant echo. The decision he needed to make was eating at him, but he knew he couldn't delay it any longer. The last few days had been a whirlwind of emotions, revelations and confrontations that had left deep marks. He had tried to run away, to find answers away from Emily, but he realized that some truths couldn't be avoided. The betrayal hurt, but it was the secrecy and prolonged lies that weighed most. He tried to rationalize what he felt, he tried to find reasons to forgive her, but the trust had been irreversibly broken. When she picked up the phone and called Emily, she knew this would be the ultimate conversation. Emily answered with a weak voice, as if she had been waiting for the call for days. Lucas asked her to meet him in the same park where they sat so many times to talk about dreams and plans. When Emily arrived, he realized how much she had changed. His eyes seemed duller, the smile that used to light up his face was now just a shadow. She sat next to him nervously, fidgeting with her hands as she waited. Lucas began by saying that he spent the last few days trying to understand everything that happened, trying to find reasons to forgive her, but that the truth was harder to ignore than he expected. Emily held his arm, begging for one more chance, saying that she would do anything to prove that she loved him and that she was willing to spend the rest of her life fixing the mistakes she made. Lucas took a deep breath and said that the problem was not just the betrayal, but the fact that she had made choices that showed how much he had been left aside. He said he couldn't trust someone who kept so many secrets, who embezzled money to another man and hid his own past as if he had no right to know. Emily cried, saying that she was afraid of losing him and that she lied to protect him, but Lucas replied that lies never protected anyone, they only destroyed them. She tried to argue, but Lucas interrupted her, saying he was tired of excuses and justifications. He said he loved the woman she once was, but that he no longer recognized who she had become. Emily stood up, desperate, asking him not to end up like this, saying they could still rebuild their marriage. Lucas shook his head, saying that some things, once broken, couldn't be repaired. He said he hoped she found peace, but that he needed to move on. Emily fell to her knees, begging him not to leave her, but Lucas walked away, leaving her there, alone, in the middle of the park. He walked without looking back, feeling heavy in his heart, but also relieved. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he could breathe. In the following days, Lucas began to reorganize his life. He officially filed for divorce, cutting off all financial and emotional ties that still linked him to Emily. It wasn't easy, but every step he took made him feel stronger. He began to focus on work, went back to hanging out with friends, and allowed himself to start thinking about a future without Emily. In the process, he unexpectedly met someone, a woman named Sophia, who worked in the same building as him. She was different from Emily in every way. He had a light energy, a sincere smile and a way of looking at him that made him feel truly seen. They started out as friends, sharing conversations about life and the challenges they faced, but soon their connection grew. Lucas realized that, despite everything, he was still capable of love, and that gave him hope. Meanwhile, Emily faced the consequences of her choices. The man she got involved with disappeared, taking some of the money she had given him. She tried to make things right, tried to ask for help, but many of the friends who were once by her side walked away after finding out the story. Emily lost her job due to the scandal and had to sell her house to pay off her debts. She felt alone, regretful and lost, but she knew it was too late to turn back. She sought professional help, trying to deal with her own mistakes and the reasons that led her to destroy her marriage. Despite the suffering, he began to rebuild his life, but he carried the weight of the consequences. Lucas and Sophia continued to grow closer, and he finally felt like he could leave the past behind. On a date by the sea, he held her hand and confessed everything he had experienced in recent months. Sophia listened in silence, and when he finished, she said she admired his strength to start over. Lucas realized, at that moment, that he was ready to move on. He still carried scars, but he knew they wouldn't define him. For the first time, he felt like he could be happy again. As Lucas walked hand in hand with Sophia, Emily watched from afar, regretful for everything she lost, but aware that she needed to continue living with the choices she made. She knew that the love she destroyed could never be rebuilt and that Lucas had found something new, something she could no longer achieve. He felt the tears flow, but he also knew it was time to follow his own path. And so Lucas's story ended not as a fairy tale, but as a reminder that life goes on even after the greatest pain. He learned that true love is based on trust and honesty, and that when those pillars are destroyed, it takes courage to let go of the past and make room for something new. As he moved forward, he felt stronger, wiser, and most of all, more alive than he had ever been. If you made it this far, leave your comment telling us what you thought of this story. We want to know your opinion about the characters' decisions and the impact that betrayal had on their lives. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories like this. We reinforce that this channel does not support any type of betrayal and that our stories are created to show the devastating consequences that a lack of honesty and respect can cause. Thanks for listening to the end, and until the next story.